What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Second Order Fantasy Football, where we get you to think about the secondary effects of NFL transactions and how understanding those details can help you win a championship. Today's video, we are going to talk about the Cleveland Browns. So news that just came out this morning in Cleveland, they are going to place the franchise tag on David Njoku, their tight end. So we're going to go through all the effects of that, key things to look out for in terms of fantasy football for the 2022 season. So David Njoku has always been a very promising tight end since he was drafted, but really has not broken out into the scene yet as an elite tight end in fantasy football. A lot of that is because the Cleveland Browns are an offense that relies heavily upon multiple tight ends and thus disperses the available points among multiple guys. So the news today is that Cleveland is going to be offering him the franchise tag, and they're also looking into potentially doing a long-term deal with him too, although the details of that have not really been released. The best case scenario of what could have happened to David Njoku for fantasy football managers is if Cleveland decided to not bring him back, and then he goes to another team, such as the Giants, which is a team that I talked about could be in the market for a tight end in my last video. But instead, he's going to be going back to Cleveland. And this creates a significant logjam as we've seen the past two seasons. And the way their offense projects, it really does not look good for David Njoku's projections long-term unless there's some shakeup at the other positions of guys there. So right now, you look at the contracts they have on this team, and it's actually very surprising to me that they've decided to bring him back because the other tight ends are also locked up for the long term as well. You've already got Austin Hooper there, who's on a 4-year, $42 million contract. So he's making about $10 million a year, and he's on the books for a couple more seasons. So you're looking now at if they do a long-term deal with David Njoku, both him and Austin Hooper being in the fold for quite a while. You also have Harrison Bryant, who's the youngest of these tight ends, and has shown some promise when he's been on the field and making some good plays, things like that. He's also on the books for another 4 years as well. So you're looking at potentially a situation where all three of these guys could be on the team for multiple seasons. So it's a little surprised me that they've decided to do this instead of addressing some other areas on the team. But to me, it shows that this team really prioritizes the running game and the play action game and short passing game that they kind of already implemented the last two seasons with Kevin Stefanski. So we take a look now at these fantasy stats and why my biggest takeaway for this Cleveland Browns situation is just avoid all of their tight ends altogether. This is what I've been doing as a fantasy football manager with them since we saw signs of this when Kevin Stefanski started taking over this team and really kind of implemented his system in 2020. So we take a look at the 2021 season and these tight ends. So the number one tight end was David Njoku for them, but he was only the 22nd ranked tight end. He he put up a total in PPR fantasy points of 107 PPR points, which equates to rough math about 7 points a game if you're playing all 16, 17 games of a season. So all that being said, not great production right there. We know David Njoku dealt with some injuries, things like that. But the biggest reason why I'm not high on David Njoku is because Austin Hooper was right there behind him. The 24th ranked tight end in 2021, he had 92.5 fantasy points in full PPR leagues. But yeah, they're splitting touches with each other. If you were to merge those two numbers together, you'd get a pretty decent clip at the tight end position, but you're not getting that because of the fact that you've split them up. And then also to complicate things as well, Harrison Bryant, the 39th ranked tight end in 2021 with 62 full PPR points that season. So the takeaway is that all three of these guys are essentially, if you think of a running back by committee, this is a tight end by committee that they're running in Cleveland. Because of that, you avoid the running back by committee teams like the New England Patriots. For a while, it was the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'd kind of still argue that they are kind of in a timeshare. But now you're in a situation in Cleveland that you're looking at a tight end by committee for quite a long time. So Yeah, that's pretty rough. But if you look at 2020, it's pretty much the same thing from that season as well. The number one tight end that season was Austin Hooper, 109 full PPR points. David Njoku dealt with injuries that season and missed most of the season. So he only had 48 full PPR points for a total of being the 44th ranked tight end that season. And Harrison Bryant cut into some of Hooper's production that season, 39th ranked tight end with 58 points. So the key takeaway from this move, franchising David Njoku, is that this is a team that you're going to want to avoid the tight ends. There's always stuff about these guys that came out last year of like, oh, David Njoku's getting hot, Austin Hooper's getting hot. You might want to consider picking them up. But then they follow it up almost immediately with either a dud game where they don't score any points, or one of the other tight ends gets all the points from them and their results are pretty much diminished. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Cleveland, though, because Baker Mayfield, there's a lot of rumors about him, and I'd argue that part of the reason the offense was pretty limited last year is because he was injured. But I don't see a situation where this is salvageable at the tight end position because of the fact that you have three guys that are all decent performers and would be very good fantasy players in terms of streaming candidates if they were alone on other teams. But the fact that they're all together, it just muddles everything and unfortunately makes it a situation that you want to avoid. So that's all I've got on this Cleveland Browns news for David Njoku being franchise tagged. Stay tuned for updates throughout this offseason as I break down the second order fantasy effects of transactions of the NFL, key things you want to look at with these minor moves that could really make a big difference for your championship push in 2022. That's all I've got. See you guys next time. Bye.